Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Apostate Prophet. There is an article that recently came to my attention, which is written by Mehdi Hasan, 2013. And the title of this article is "The Sorry Truth is that the virus of anti-Semitism has infected the British Muslim community." It pains me to have to admit this, but anti-Semitism isn't just tolerated in some sections of the British community, a British Muslim community. It is routine and commonplace. Any Muslim reading this article, if they are honest with themselves, will know instantly what I'm referring to. It's our dirty little secret. You could call it the banality of Muslim anti-Semitism. I can't keep count of the number of Muslims I have come across, from close friends and relatives to perfect strangers, for whom weird and wacky anti-Semitic conspiracy theories are the default explanation for a range of national and international events. Who killed Diana and Dodi? The Mossad, say many Muslims. They didn't want the British heir to the throne having an Arab stepfather. What about 9/11? 4,000 Jews in New York told to stay home from work on the morning of 11th of September 2001. How about the financial crisis? Jewish bankers, obviously. Oh, and the Holocaust, don't be silly, never happened. He's just describing regular Muslim sentiments, regular Muslim conversations here in this article. Growing up, I always assumed that this obsession with the Jews was a hallmark of the first-generation immigrants from the subcontinent. In recent years, I've been depressed to discover that there are plenty of second-generation Muslim youths born and bred in multiracial Britain who have drunk the anti-Semitic Kool-Aid. I'm often attacked by them for working in the Jewish-owned media.
By the way, I mean, he's thinking. Notice what his thinking was back then. That the second generation is going to integrate. Isn't it like the opposite? Isn't like aren't the second and third generations, aren't they becoming like more radical than their parents and grandparents?
Yeah, there is a thing. There is a trend which is that the second generation, the ones after the first generation, are more radical. The truth is that the virus of anti-Semitism has infected members of the British Muslim community, both young and old. No, the ongoing Israel-Palestine conflict hasn't helped matters, but this goes beyond the Middle East. How else to explain why British Pakistanis are so often the most ardent advocates of anti-Semitic conspiracies, even though there are so few Jews living in Pakistan? It is sheer hypocrisy for Muslims to complain of Islamophobia in every nook and cranny of British public life, to denounce the newspapers for running Muslim-baiting headlines, and yet ignore the rampant anti-Semitism in our own backyard. Say that again, Mehdi Hasan.
That is a rare ability in his community, the ability to spot blatant hypocrisy.
Yeah. We cannot credibly fight Islamophobia while making excuses for Judeophobia. Yeah. To be honest, I've always been reluctant to write a column such as this. To accuse my fellow Muslims of being soft on the scourge of anti-Semitism isn't easy. I feel as if I'm dubbing in the community, telling tales to the non-Muslim teacher. Nor do I particularly want to assist the English Defense League in its relentless campaign to demonize all Muslims everywhere as extremists and bigots. And when ex-Muslims come out and speak some of the truths about Islam and Muslim mentality, the things that we are taught, we are immediately attacked by Muslims, by traditional Muslims, by others, as traitors. You are not supposed to just go out there and tell people what's actually happening in the Muslim community. If you do this, then this is really, really bad. And Mehdi Hasan, at some point, was openly here talking about some of these problems, about the anti-Semitism, for which he received a lot of criticism and for which many Muslims don't like him, still don't like him, for which many Muslims insulted him on October 7 because he condemned some of the things that happened. But imagine, I just want Mehdi Hasan to come out and repeat this here, that it is sheer hypocrisy to complain about Islamophobia while ignoring anti-Semitism among Muslims. We aren't, and we are not all anti-Semites, but as a community, we do have a Jewish problem. As a community, we do have a Jewish problem. I'm also aware that this column will also be held up by some of my fellow Muslims as proof that Mehdi Hasan has sold out to the Jews. we Muslims must now admit is that anti-Semitism passed the dinner table test in polite British Muslim society long ago. Anti-Semitism is normal among Muslims. It is common. It is everywhere. Mehdi Hasan, in this article from 2013, openly and clearly admits directly that Muslims have a huge anti-Semitism problem, that it is so common that every Muslim knows exactly what he's talking about, that those who pretend they don't know about it are basically not being honest, and that he is revealing the secrets of Muslims being extremely anti-Semitic. I wonder why he doesn't do this today. Nowadays, he acts like he never wrote such things. If you are Netanyahu and your October 7 happens, what would you do? Let's see what he said.
That's a great question. So short answer is I resign because I'm responsible for that attack. I'm the one who botched security at the border. I'm the one who propped up Hamas with money from Qatar over the years and allowed them to be propped up as a way to divide the Palestinian people. I'm the one who's had millions of my own people on the streets for months protesting against my authoritarian.
This is very funny. What he's referring to is actually true. Netanyahu's government administration was allowing funds from Qatar to go to Hamas. What's happening is that Netanyahu and some people who supported him and his way of thinking adopted a policy of appeasing Hamas and allowing them to receive funds that are sent to them from Qatar, for example.
Yeah, so the idea in all of that is if the leaders, if everything sucks for everyone, they've got nothing to lose by just launching, constantly launching terrorist attacks. Whereas if they have money and are able to build up, then they've got something that, they've got something they don't want to lose. And so they're not going to be inclined to go messing around with someone who might bomb it. And didn't work.
Right now, just forcing Netanyahu to resign in this environment, in the middle of this war, where most of the world, where half of the world is trying to attack Israel and trying to make Israel stop, would be a terrible, terrible, terrible idea. So I'm glad we're not listening to Mehdi Hasan here.
יש מי שמנסים לעצור את המלחמה עכשיו, לפני השגת כל יעדיה. הם עושים זאת על ידי הטחת האשמות שווא נגד צה"ל, נגד ממשלת ישראל ונגד ראש ממשלת ישראל. הם עושים זאת על ידי מאמץ להביא לבחירות עכשיו בעיצומה של המלחמה. ואת זה הם עושים, כי הם יודעים שבחירות עכשיו יעצרו את המלחמה וישתקו את המדינה לפחות ל6 חודשים. אז שיהיה ברור, אם נפסיק את המלחמה עכשיו, לפני השגת כל יעדיה, המשמעות היא שישראל הפסידה במלחמה.
This is very crucial, exactly.
I want you to imagine that you are the Prime Minister of Israel when that atrocity happens in Israel. What do you do?
Right.
That's a great question. So
that is clearly asking him what should be done. What should be done? Not imagine you're Benjamin Netanyahu.
There's obviously a lot of concern mounting around the world about the scale of Israel's response. And that's really what I guess my question was alluding to. It's very, very difficult to know how any Prime Minister of Israel could have responded in a particularly different manner to the way that Netanyahu did. Putting aside all the reasons that you say he should have resigned, and by the way, I broadly agree with them. So in terms of the Israel people, the Prime Minister at the time, the response to what happened that day was going to always have to be enormous, wasn't it?
So you're right in terms of the emotional response. It was going to be enormous. And I would take us back to 9/11, Piers. You mentioned Iraq. After 9/11, there was an emotional response in the US that something had to be done, right? There's the famous Yes Minister dialogue. Something has to be done. This is something, let's do it. And we invaded Afghanistan, which didn't solve the problem of terrorism, made it worse, punished innocent people who had nothing to do.
Oh yeah, should it have been done? Afghanistan was totally necessary. I mean, it didn't go great, but Afghanistan was the country where the Taliban was in charge, and the Taliban was harboring and collaborating with Al Qaeda, with Osama bin Laden.
Yeah, and that's a different. I mean, the United States is powerful enough that if they had wanted to destroy the Taliban the way Israel wants to destroy Hamas, they could have done it. I mean, you'd have to go up into some caves, and it's going to be really, really messy. You could get the job done. No one wants to do that anymore in the world, except Israel is willing to do it. But Israel's in a very different place in that it's a very small area with a bunch of terrorists hiding. Israel is entirely capable of achieving every goal it has set out right now. If you've got a 9/11 attack and you got the entire world where people may be hiding and all kinds of people collaborating and so on, anything you do is going to be a pretty messy job, and it's not clear that you're actually going to be successful in whatever you're trying to do. Israel can crush Hamas. They can.
The best leaders, the most strategic leaders, the most moral leaders are the ones who can take a pause, take a breath, and say, are we going to make the situation better or worse? Are we striking out strategically or just for the sake of vengeance and revenge? And you talk about Israeli having to do this. Look, they didn't have to do.
Shut up, man.
Yeah, that's terrible. What's he saying? Yes, and the best leaders, the one that can sit back and pause.
The best leaders just write a tweet in response to a terrorist.
Yeah, sometimes it's not the time to just sit back and
if you guys attack and rape our guys, then you guys will be bombed. So that's that. You know, there's no room for strongly worded letters or tweets, Mehdi Hasan. And right now, Hamas will be bombed too until they're done.
How else do you get rid of Hamas if you don't go about it in the blunt, brutal manner that Israel is doing? And if you do it the way they're doing it, how do you avoid the kind of casualty rate of people under 18, given that that's half the population?
I'm really curious if he will give an actual response.
He's not. And if he does, I haven't watched this. If he does, it's going to be the most insane, idiotic nonsense I've ever heard in my life.
So, three things very briefly. Number one, you do it by not deliberately targeting civilian targets and schools and hospitals and cemeteries and mosques and universities and churches. You don't have snipers shooting at hospitals or Christian women inside a church. That's how you avoid the casualties.
Okay, hasn't been done, so continue.
Number two, I don't accept the premise of your question that this is the way to defeat Hamas. I think even if I'm an Israeli hawk, I criticize.
You idiot, the guy asked you what the solution is.
Netanyahu and say, this is not the way to defeat Hamas. This is actually absurd to think you can defeat Hamas in this way. We have countless episodes from history.
No, that's exactly how you defeat Hamas. What Israel is doing is exactly. Now,
why is this guy not answering the question?
Yeah, there's a negative side in that lots of people are going to be against you and that there are going to be lots of civilian casualties and so on. But no, this is exactly how you destroy Hamas.
But he's just not answering the question.
And he's a dope for saying stupid stuff.
We have countless episodes from history that show us this is not how you defeat a guerrilla movement, a resistance movement, a terror group, as you say, whatever words you want to use. In fact, you have Israeli generals.
If you have them cornered, it's exactly how you destroy them. If they were out in the woods, somewhere in the mountains, and you could not find them and could not get to them and so on, and they could just wear you down over time, that's one thing. If you have them surrounded on one side by water and surrounded on every other side by fences and walls, you know exactly where they are, and you can keep hunting them.
Alhamdulillah. Wait a minute.
This guy's a dummy. He doesn't like. I'm not a professional war expert, but I know more than this dude.
And number three, look, the reality is Hamas is a symptom of the problem. As long as you treat Hamas as a problem rather than as a symptom of the problem, you're never going to get rid of Hamas. Or if you do, by some fantasy means, get rid of Hamas, you'll just get another version of Hamas. Because
I agree.
you've got tens of thousands of orphans. You've got people who've lost their kids, their spouses, their siblings. What?
Look at this. Let me replay Pierce's question one more time.
It's a very simple question.
How else do you get rid of Hamas if you don't go about it in the blunt, brutal manner that Israel is doing? And if you do it the way they're doing it, how do you avoid the kind of casualty rate of people under 18, given that that's half the population?
Look, did you hear the question was very simple. How do you get rid of Hamas? And if you go about it the way Israel is doing it right now, how do you avoid the casualties that we are speaking of and so on? This is the question, right? Mehdi Hasan's answer now has nothing at all to do with what Piers just asked. If you don't agree with that part, then you're not supposed to answer that part anyway. You're supposed to propose how to get rid of Hamas. This guy's not answering the question, either because he doesn't understand a very, very simple question, or because he doesn't want to understand it, because he doesn't want to respond to it. I don't know, is this guy an idiot or is he just dishonest?
I think dishonest.
Yeah, I don't think he's an idiot. I think he's probably intelligent enough to make out what is being asked here, and I would suspect that he's being dishonest as well. So he did not answer the question, and
No.
Piers just let him get away with not answering the question, and we'll just move on now. This is what we're dealing with.
Because I think you can't kill the ideology And in fact, all you will do is entrench the ideology.
Oh, you
think,
can kill the ideology. You can
Yeah,
kill
you
it. Yeah. Israel's just dealing with the Israel is, they're right in the sense that Israel is dealing with the symptom of the problem, Hamas. The actual underlying problem is Islam. And we're going to deal with that.
Israel have thought through to a logical end game, which is you're not going to get rid of the thinking that inspired Hamas, because a lot of people will have suffered such
Hamas.
appalling grief with their close family in
But
the way
again,
you
Piers,
described, that they're
I think
going to
you're
want
being
to
a
get
little-
revenge.
I think you're being a little too generous to the Israelis here, and with the greatest respect, I think your questions reflect a little bit of a naivety about what Israel's doing here. You're starting from the premise that Israel is trying to defeat Hamas. I don't accept that premise. I don't believe that's what Israel is trying
What do you
to
think they're
because
trying to do?
They wouldn't be doing it this way. I think they're trying to take back Gaza. I think they're trying to erase the resistance in Gaza. I think they're trying to get rid of the people from Gaza. I think this is
Yeah, Israel really had this fantastic idea 20 years ago to say, you know what, guys? You know what, guys? Let us spend all of our resources to remove ourselves from Gaza and forcibly remove some of the settlers there who don't even want to leave, and have everyone resettled out of there, and spend so many funds to relocate those people, and also leave a bunch of things behind in Gaza, which we basically are giving Gaza for free, and leave that place and comply with international requirements, and then give them a chance to have autonomy while also delivering a bunch of free stuff from now on, and focusing so many of our international resources on this place just so we can like have this go on for 20 years, whereafter we will possibly be attacked at some point and have thousands of our own people killed, and then we will go in there and take all of it back. Yes, that's what we're doing. This is the most reasonable way to go. This is very practical. This makes a lot of sense. This is what we're going to do. Yeah, completely reasonable. Yes, yes,
and-
fantastic.
Yeah. And I mean, he specifically said they're not trying to defeat Hamas because look at what they're doing. What are they doing? Well, yeah, they keep going after Hamas and they're hunting them down wherever they're hiding. So that means they're not trying to destroy Hamas.
No.
Now, there is the relevant issue of Israel. Let's suppose it takes another 5-6 months or something like that, but they completely crush Hamas. They have captured or killed every Hamas jihadi. Let's suppose they have destroyed Hamas. The issue both these guys are bringing up is, but that still leaves open the future. There's going to be a lot of disgruntled people really upset. Yeah, that's happened in every prior conflict with Israel. It looks like now we talked about this before, but in psychology, this is called traumatic one trial learning. You want the population to recoil at any future thought of launching terrorist attacks, right? So you can have a bunch of upset people. Oh, look what they did, and so on. But you can actually implant. You can program their future thinking to go, whatever we do, we are not launching a terrorist attack against these guys because we've seen what they will do. We are not doing that.
It doesn't look like there's going to be a massive massacre or genocide or whatever it is that this guy predicts will happen. It's almost like he's wishing for it.
they've mowed the lawn, as they put it in previous wars. This time they're going in to erase the population. There's a plausible genocide.
Yeah, of course. If we believe the numbers that Hamas gave, 30,000 people died, of whom, by the way, around 30% are Hamas. But yeah, what they actually want to do is to go in and kill the entire population, the 2 million people. Yeah, that's what they want to do. Yeah, very, very plausible. Very plausible, Mehdi.
If you listen to Israeli officials, as you know, it's laid out in the South African petition, they are very genocidal in their approach to flattening and burning down Gaza. It's not about destroying Hamas. And if it was about destroying Hamas, why has Netanyahu and Smotrich and others talked about how Hamas is an asset to Israel? Why do they say that openly, Piers?
Well, he was clearly massively deluded, I think, Netanyahu, about having anything to do with Hamas. I think Netanyahu's plan was quite...
He's referring to one report according to which Netanyahu said that Hamas needs to be in place if we want to ever prevent a Palestinian state from forming, which is a quote that has never been confirmed. That's a rumor. And the only other thing that he said is that money needs to flow into Gaza to Hamas so that they won't continue bombing us or attack, or so they won't continue firing rockets at us and attacking us. That's it. He's once again misrepresenting things entirely.
Straightforward, which was to separate Hamas from the Palestinian Authority and create a split in the Palestinians at an official level. And he thought that that was the best way of preserving security for Israel. He couldn't have been more wrong. I mean, the thing I do want to ask you, I don't think you've called Hamas terrorists. In fact, you've gone out of your way to call them fighters. Do you still think that, or do you accept that what they did on October the 7th was an act of terrorism on a heinous scale, and therefore you have to call them terrorists?
So you're wrong, Piers. In my very first MSNBC monologue after October 7th, I referred to what happened on October 7th as terrorism. In fact, when I was 16 years old, I wrote a letter to the Independent newspaper condemning Hamas bus bombings in the mid-1990s. So you're wrong on multiple levels. I don't expect you to know about my 16-year-old self, but clearly my MSNBC output is all there for anyone to see.
So just to be clear,
I can confirm, just looking at checking his tweets and also some of the stuff he wrote earlier, that he did condemn things that happened on October 7th. In fact, I showed it yesterday. Norman Finkelstein called him a sewer rat because he condemned October 7th.
Just to be clear, it was an act of terrorism, and Hamas are terrorists. That's your position.
I think the Hamas fighters who went into Israel and killed civilians and kidnapped babies, certainly I would call them terrorists.
He didn't answer the question. Is he going to answer the question, actually?
Just as I call Israeli soldiers who kidnap children and kill children terrorists.
Okay, first he didn't answer the question, the actual question, and then he also immediately jumped to Israel. Listen to the question one more time. What is Piers Morgan asking? Who are terrorists?
I think the Hamas output is all there for anyone to see.
So just to be clear, it was an act of terrorism, and Hamas are terrorists.
Hamas are terrorists. That's the question. So it was an act of terrorism, and Hamas are terrorists. That's the question. And now listen to the answer.
That's your position.
I think the Hamas fighters who went into Israel and killed civilians and kidnapped babies, certainly I would call them terrorists. Just as I call Israelis.
You see that? So Hamas members
are terrorists. That's your position.
I think the Hamas fighters who went into Israel and killed civilians.
Hamas are not terrorists, but Hamas fighters who went into Israel and killed civilians
and kidnapped babies, certainly.
And kidnapped babies.
I would call them terrorists.
Are certainly terrorists. That was not the question. Of course, yeah, you could say that. You could say that. But what is so hard about answering that very simple question? So, are you confirming, or do you agree that Hamas are terrorists? Yes or no? Well, I would say that those Hamas fighters who did go in there and did these and these specific things are terrorists. Yeah, of course. That's not the question. Sorry. And this is what you see. Here you have it again. This guy is dishonest. He's deliberately pausing right there and thinking about it and not answering the actual question that is asked, but reframing it in such a way that he doesn't have to answer the question. And I'm pretty sure that Piers Morgan will not push. He will just let him get away with it. Let's see.
Just as I call Israeli soldiers who kidnap children and kill children terrorists. I use the terrorist label more freely because otherwise it's just a politicized, empty phrase that we just apply to our enemies. What I would say, Piers, is that I find it a problem, and you know this, you've joked about all.
Yep, there you have it. Mehdi Hasan immediately used the opportunity to change the subject and is now going to ask about Israel.
The memes about you, this obsession with what we call Hamas, which is a question you pose, let's be honest, Piers, to most of your pro-Palestinian brown guests. You don't ask your Israeli or Jewish or pro-Israeli guests to condemn Israeli terrorism or Israeli war crimes at the start of an interview in the way you do.
Well, no, I've been asked directly.
Well, now, why did Brown come into this again? Why did race come into this again?
Because it works with a certain crowd. As soon as you just look. In fact, look at you. Look how white you are. And look at me. I'm brown. Who's everyone going to believe here?
He immediately played the race card again. Well, what does the race have to do with this at all? What does race have to do with anything? The spokesperson of the Israeli government that we have seen and heard quite so often, who was also interviewed by Piers Morgan. This guy. Is this guy white or brown?
I think that I asked all the pro-Palestinian guests who've come on that question quite quickly, because I think it reveals a state of mind. If, like you, and I'm sorry, I didn't realize you had in that first piece on MSNBC done that. So I take back the suggestion you hadn't. And I'm glad that you have called them that. I don't think you can call them anything else. So the moment you have a pro-Palestinian guest who wants to avoid calling what Hamas did an act of terrorism by terrorists, I think it's very revealing about their mindset. And I think it's the wrong mindset.
Here's my problem with that. Why is that not applied to Israeli guests? I would be fine, Piers, if you had Palestinian guests and you begin by asking them, do you condemn Hamas war crimes? Because what Hamas did on October 7th was a war crime. But then you should start with Israeli guests and pro-Israeli guests saying, do you condemn Israeli war crimes, which have been documented by the UN, every human rights group on the planet? You don't. You had Naftali Bennett, the former Israeli prime minister, on a couple of weeks ago. I watched the interview. You're opening...
Because on the one hand, you have alleged war crimes. On the other hand, you have war crimes that are undeniable, which were broadcast to the entire world by the terrorists themselves, and which nobody at this point can possibly even try to reasonably deny, such as taking hostages. Yeah. You can make all kinds of allegations about Israeli war crimes right now. Israel can deny that there are war crimes taking place, and you can't say, how can you deny it? It's just so obvious. It's right there. Like there is not even any room for deniability. There is no room to deny it. You can't say that. You have to prove it. You have to go to a court and go through with it. Whereas with Hamas, you have the war crime of taking hostages. There is no denying it. They know that they have hostages. They announced to the world that they took hostages. They give hostages out. They want to make deals to exchange the hostages. Taking hostages in and of itself is a war crime. There is no way that you can reasonably deny this. There is a difference here. And of course, there's also the fact that Hamas went in directly on October 7 and broadcasted and recorded it with their own cameras, that they went into the civilian population and started firing randomly at civilians, that they killed 360 people at a party, at a music festival, and so on. These are undeniable war crimes.
This guy starts off as pretty darn radical and then becomes nice by 2013. And then
I remember some harsh clip from him. What was that?
Yeah, there's one. It's got the subtitles on there.
Different from the rest of the non-Muslims, from the rest of those human beings who live their lives as animals, bending any rule to fulfill any desire. Once we do that, we are lost.
In Islam, to believe is to know. To disbelieve is not to know. That is what it fundamentally comes down to. It is to remain ignorant, to cover up knowledge.
Different from the rest of the non-Muslims, from the rest of those human beings who live their lives as animals.
As animals. Well, yeah, we are all animals. That's pretty nice. Pretty nice. Pretty nice guy here. Pretty nice guy.
Should have said that to Pierce. What would I expect from you, Pierce, when you live your life as cattle?
People do ask me, do you think Israel are terrorists? And I said, no, I don't think they are. And I have repeated, because I think because they were responding to an act of terrorism so heinous, it demanded a massive military response. The question for me that's caused me a moral quandary is what is an acceptably proportionate level of response? And I don't know the answer, but I don't think you can call people responding to an act of terror on that scale terrorists for responding. What you can do is hold them to account.
The problem is, if you go to Gaza, Piers, and you talk to Palestinians, they will say that Hamas were responding. If we play the who started it game, we go back many decades.
When did Israel kill?
What we need to have is
when did Israel kill 1,200?
Yes, maybe we should go back to who started it, and then we should talk about who started it in the 1800s, early 1900s, 1920, 1929, 1936, 1939, 1947, 1948, and so on. Maybe we will then get to a conclusion and see that the Islamist side, the Arab side, that has been the aggressor consistently, and then see what we can do after that point. Thanks, everyone. Have a fantastic day.